I think the end of the film says it best. Zognis keinmal as the geistem lesten weg, mir seinen do. We are here. And that underpins really the whole work and the greatness of the partisans, the survivors. I want to begin by joining in the tribute to Mitch Graff. I think after you've seen the film, this was just one of the many things that he has been doing, but here's someone who wrote, who directed, who produced the film at the same time as he has been giving the inspired leadership to the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation all these years. Kol hakavod, Mitch. Kol hakavod. I also want to express appreciation to the co-chairs, to Paul, to Elliot, to Sherry Pearl, to all those who are making this such an inspired and meaningful expression of our heritage and also of our commitment. And in that context, I want to pay tribute to the Jewish partisans, to the heroism, to the gvura, which underpinned their resistance and the resistance that underpinned their heroism. A heroism, and the film can only give you kind of looking glass into what that heroism was. But a heroism which resisted the genocidal Nazis, which resisted their genocidal collaborators, which resisted the non-Jewish partisans and their anti-Semitic impulses, where they should have worked together in common cause, and yet they had to worry about the fellow non-Jewish partisans who might, as they did, turn against them. But there were also, as we saw in the film, the righteous who helped them. Though there were also so many in the film cannot show this, the bystanders, those who were indifferent, those who allowed all this to happen. And one can appreciate the heroism, the resistance, the moral and physical courage of the partisans when we understand that every moment held out the possibility of capture, of torture, of imprisonment, of execution. And so it was a heroism and a resistance of survival against all the odds that was dedicated to the heroic rescue of other Jews, where Jewish partisans were engaged in fighting, in dying, in living, in preserving dignity. They embodied, in effect, the highest form of what tzedek, tzedek tirdof means, of justice, justice shall you pursue, in, as the film put it, in their ongoing struggle against the worst of injustice. And as I was watching the film, I have to tell you, Harry, we have more of a kinship. That bio that you would have read and wasted everybody's time would never have told you the most important things. The most important thing is I'm also a Canadian Jew of East European heritage. I'm also married to a Sephardic wife who's Israeli. I also have 4 children, but my boy, the only boy amongst the 4, is also named Jonathan. I mean, there is a lot of kinship, and I just want to say about my parents, Zichronam Livracha, blessed memory, because I was thinking about them during the film. I was thinking about it because it was my father who taught me that tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue, is equal to all the other commandments combined, as he put it. This must be your vishanam tam levanecha. This must be that which you must teach onto your children. which is something that you did, Harry, which is something that you taught onto your children. But I have to say that it was my mother who, when she heard my father speaking of tzedek, tzedek tirdof, she said to me, if you want to pursue justice, then you have to understand, you have to feel the injustice about you. You have to go in and about your community and beyond and feel the injustice and combat the injustice. Otherwise, the pursuit of justice is just a theoretical construct. Otherwise, it's just an abstraction. You have to combat the injustice. And from my conversation with Danielle, your wife, over dinner this evening, I felt this sense that she had of combating injustice, so that you both engaged in the Vishinamtam Levanecha, which I felt when I was talking to your boys over dinner as well. And as it happens, we meet at a rather historic moment of remembrance and reminder. We are meeting, when we speak about the Holocaust, the Shoah, we're meeting on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the Shoah of Hungarian Jews. In fact, this past April, and that's why the film resonated for me again so much, this past April I reenacted the mass deportation. I was in Budapest, where from the Danube to the train station, some 430,000 Hungarian Jews, mass deportation to their death in 10 weeks. The worst killing field in the whole of the Shoah. And then I went afterwards from Budapest, after reenacting that particular part, to the March of the Living, to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And therefore, we too, when I was there, we said Kaddish. And so the film was resonating for me over and over again. And it's also the 70th anniversary, as we meet this evening, the 70th anniversary of the rescue of the remnant of Hungarian Jews by Raoul Wallenberg. This disappeared hero of the Holocaust, the person whom the United Nations called the greatest humanitarian of the 20th century, who showed how one person with the compassion to care and the courage to act can confront evil, can resist, and thereby transform history. And that's what the partisans were doing. They confronted evil. They resisted. Isidore Karten and the partisans saved 400 Jews, reminding us what our sages taught, if you save a single life, it is as if you have saved an entire universe. And you know, with regard to Raoul Wallenberg, Adolf Eichmann, who organized that mass deportation to the death camps, the Nazi bureaucratic death murderer who came to Hungary to organize the deportations, he spoke of Wallenberg as being the Judenhund Wallenberg, Wallenberg the Jewish dog. But the survivors, and I've met them who were saved by Wallenberg, for them, he was, as they put it, the guardian angel. And as for Wallenberg, he himself put it in his own modest way, for me, there was no other choice. And when one thinks about it, for the partisans, every one of them was a Wallenberg in their own way. And while this film, and importantly and compellingly so, shows the great heroism of Isidore Karten and the partisans that he was involved with, we should also remember there were heroic women that were there as part of those partisans. And the partisans together are kind of a collection of Wallenbergs. And so, on this anniversary of anniversaries, I just want to close by summarizing the number of lessons which the film recalled for me, which the courageous and heroic resistance of the partisans recalled for me. And the first lesson, and it's a lesson that JPEF teaches, is the danger of forgetting and the imperative, the responsibility of remembrance. Le devoir de mémoire, the duty of memory, the duty of bearing witness to unspeakable horrors and the collective failure to act which made them possible. Jonathan's words in the film reminded me when he spoke about Darfur and Rwanda, the collective failure that made them, those mass murders, possible. And the 6 million who died, who were murdered, not a matter of abstract statistics. As we say on such moments of remembrance, unto each person there is a name, each person had an identity, and you see the Yad Vashem preserving that, and I saw that when I was in Oswiecim-Birkenau in the museum. Each person was a universe. And the enduring lesson that comes out of all this that the partisans teach us, and this first lesson about the importance of remembrance, is that we are each, wherever we are, the guarantors of each other's destiny. The partisans acted that out with the greatest of courage that can be summoned to anyone's command. The second lesson, it's a lesson that comes from the Rwandan genocide as well as the Holocaust, is that the Holocaust and the Rwandan genocide occurred not simply because of the machinery of death, but because of state-sanctioned cultures of hate. As the Supreme Court of Canada put it in a trial of a Rwandan genocidaire, that the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. It began with words. These, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism, the chilling facts of history. And the third lesson, and an enduring lesson, is the danger of anti-Semitism, the oldest and most enduring of hatreds, and the most lethal. If the Holocaust is a metaphor for radical evil, then anti-Semitism is a metaphor for radical hatred. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews died at Oswiecim because of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism did not die. And as we saw this summer in the Hamas terrorist assault on Israel, became a tipping point for this international anti-Semitism, not only in the Middle East and beyond. I still find it incredible that Hamas can have a charter which openly calls for the destruction of Israel and the killing of Jews wherever they may be, and that this can give birth also to anti-Semitism rather than the combating of anti-Semitism, which this film teaches us so compellingly must be our responsibility. The fourth and painful and poignant lesson, and with this I move to a close, is that Holocaust crimes and the genocides that followed in Rwanda and Darfur did not only result from state-sanctioned cultures of hate, but from crimes of indifference because of conspiracies of silence. What makes the Rwandan genocide so unspeakable is not only the horror of the genocide, that would be bad enough, but the fact that this genocide was preventable. Nobody could say that we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. Just as with regard to Darfur, we knew, but we did not act. Just as with regard to the killing fields, and Jonathan and I were discussing it again over dinner, we know what is going on, and we are not acting. And so the final lesson that I want to mention here as well, and that has to do with the state of Israel. And it's an enduring lesson that we should never forget. It's not the case, as you sometimes hear, that if there had been no Holocaust, there would not have been a state of Israel. But it's the other way around. that if there had been a state of Israel, there would not have been the Holocaust or the horrors of Jewish history. And that is something we should never forget. And so I want to close by saying we must always remember and pay tribute to the rescuers like Raoul Wallenberg, to the partisans like Isidore Karten and those in the film, to the survivors amongst us who endured the worst of inhumanity, but sometimes found and somehow found in the resources of their own humanity the power and the will to go on, to rebuild their lives as they have contributed to the building of the communities in which we live, and we are all your beneficiaries. Beneficiaries of the survivors, the beneficiaries of the partisans, and we must always mirzainen do because of that heroism, because of that courage. And I'd like to now call up Jonathan and Izzy, named after his grandfather, and Sharon, up here so we can engage in a conversation here on stage. As they're coming up, I want to also recognize Charles Bedzo, the international chairman and a guiding spirit and inspiration of the Zanaya. Kol hakavod.
I get to do it's too
You know, I had the pleasure of meeting with Jonathan and Izzy and Sharon just over dinner for the first time, and there was, if I may say so, you know, an immediate kinship, an immediate connection. And I just wanted to ask, because in experiencing your heritage in this film, I'm just wondering, and you can each answer in any way, did you come out of this and reconnecting with your grandfather and the partisans, come out with it with a feeling of a special sense of responsibility that arose because of that experience?
Start.
So, I always had the connection with my grandfather. I always felt very, very close to him. But if the film did anything, it really reinforced that the familiarity with who he is and what he stood for. And it extended beyond just Judaism. It extended beyond just protecting us. It extends to all walks of life, all racism. And I think that's what really hit it home for me. It's the fact that I saw firsthand what my family went through, and what I know firsthand what my family is going through. And it's really encouraged me to take a stand. And when I visited the schools, when I spoke to the kids, I can't even can I call them kids at this? I'm 18, I can't say youth. I felt that this is it really encouraged me to do something. And so that's why I'm planning on, God willing, joining the army very soon, hopefully. We'll have to discuss it. But.
You know, if you want to hear another incredible coincidence, which we discussed this evening, that my son, one also named Jonathan, has advised me now that he's going on Aliyah this June. So, and joining the army. So there it is.
To answer this question, kind of like what Jonathan said, I always had that, I was educated at a young age about the hardships that my ancestors went through, along with other people. And I feel like, just like Jonathan, if anything, it enforced it. But also to those who have the guts to deny the Holocaust, those kids who go to school with me today, and if anyone denies it, I could say that I had a first-hand experience viewing gas chambers at Auschwitz, and just be able to educate them, because I was educated at a young age, and to people who would be educated by me, that they can receive it for someone who had it firsthand, that they're also friends with. And so it's not only coming from someone who's older than them and who'll just be like, oh, we'll talk. Someone who's their friend and who will say that, yes, I saw it, and this is how it happened. Don't say otherwise.
Yeah.
Sure.
Similar to my two brothers, the connection between my grandfather and I was always evident because I grew up hearing a lot of the same stories about him as them. I knew a lot about him. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually go to Poland and actually experience the things closely, but I don't feel that changes the obligation I feel to educate kids that are ill-informed about many aspects of the Holocaust and many of the roles that Jews played in the Holocaust. So even though I didn't go to that film, the fact that I was able to sort of experience through Mitch Braff's perspective what they went through about my grandfather, I still feel like I have that obligation to educate kids that just don't know. So that's what the trip gave me.
Well, you just touched on something. When we think of Holocaust survivors, of course, then we think of people who are now, let's say, as senior citizens. It's interesting when we think of it, the partisans were young people. They were teenagers. And the question is, we're sitting here and you've experienced it in the film. What are some of the lessons you think come out of that film, out of your engagement with it, for young people today?
So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, go.
I spoke about this in San Francisco. I was talking to a group of kids that were very like my age. And I said, and my dad brought up a point that the kids who started in the Holocaust, the youngest kids were 6 to 8 years old. And if they could do such a substantial change to the history books, I feel like the kids who I was speaking to today and the people my age can make a stand, could educate themselves about what happened and make sure it doesn't get forgotten and it doesn't get repeated.
When I think about the partisans and their age and the fact that they fought at such a young age, it makes me remember that the idea of the strong Jew. We're strong. We're very, very strong, academically, but also physically, and we need to show people that. We need to show people that we're not, we're not only just good at numbers and counting and all the stereotypes. We're also a proud folk, and we need to speak up. We can't, for example, my good friend of mine, Sam Feder, called me up from Yale a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Jonathan, you won't believe what happened. They painted a SWAT sticker on my dorm, and they said, Zio-Nazi, which has become a new buzzword. And it's brought to me the idea that the war is not just back then. The war was back then, and still is now. It's maybe not a war of combat, which it is in Israel, but in the United States it's a war of thought and it's a war of ideals. And every single person, I mean, you must have kids that go to college. You have influence within these colleges. You can speak to them. You can speak. You know the heads of the deans and whatnot. To talk to them, explain to them the situation, and you need to teach your kids how to combat this. Let them learn. And I think that if every single person knows the history very, very well, knows the history of Israel, knows the history of where they came from, then they'll be proud to be Jewish. The strong Jew, not just the smart, but the strong Jew. And I think that's something that we have to really teach our kids, to be proud of our past and be proud of who we are, which is something we're not seeing, which we really need to start to do.
I think the notion of the partisans' age and Jonathan's mention of an act of anti-Semitism on school grounds reminds me of an incident of anti-Semitism that I spoke about a little bit in San Francisco on, that I endured or dealt with, and it also relates back to another thing John said about the strong Jew physically and educationally, and it reminds me of the mistakes that I did in that situation. I dealt with an act of anti-Semitism physically. Somebody was, making jokes, drawing swastikas and stuff, and I dealt with it physically. And I think that we should, and I feel that I dealt with it wrong because I should have, like Izzy mentioned, educated this person about what was wrong, why it's not right to do it, to preach love, not hate. And even though, my grandfather took part in armed resistance, I think that it's my obligation now to take part in resistance, but not one on the battlefield, not one where my life's in jeopardy directly, but one where I can resist academically and intellectually. And this film gives me this obligation, gives me this reminder, gives me this connection to always make sure to academically educate and academically resist and really let people that don't know better know. And I feel that if the partisans at the young age that they were able to do this in a much harder way, were able to do this physically, I have to at least be able to do it academically.
Do you feel your contemporaries have an appreciation of some of the understandings that you have?
Well, I went to Ramaz High School. Didi Vanel is standing right here. She, my mentor. And I think I went to a unique high school in the sense that it really did have my contemporaries, they knew what was going on and they were just as educated as I was. But I live in a different world now. I'm in college now. And not everybody had the privilege that I had. Not everybody is thank God, is as privileged as I am. So I do see that sense of responsibility to take what I know and what I have and really not influence, but show the other side, at least understand, have a sense of understanding and communication.
On the other hand, I go to the public high school up in the Bronx, and there, and also in the Catholic school that we went to, I mentioned before, you went inside and we went into the auditorium, and one of the first things that was said was, out of all of you guys here, how many people know who the Partisans were? And maybe like 10 kids raised their hands. Oh, you guys want to raise your hand? Maybe like 10 kids raised their hands, and you were looking at a group of 150 kids, and they didn't know. And I was just shocked by that. And these are the kids. These are the people who are our future. These are the kids that are going to be sitting in the Senate, that are going to be sitting in our, that are going to be important. And I feel like if you don't know that, if we weren't looked at as a people who can fight back, and we were just looked at as a people who can go to sheep like sheep to the slaughter,
If you want to finish your thought?
Okay, you can
no,
talk.
he says if we're looked at now as if we were looked at people, and tell me if this is wrong or not, if we were looked as people that could have easily been taken advantage of and exploited, nothing stops them from looking at us that way again. Is that the notion you're
Yeah, I was about to finish.
It's nice where one brother can start a sentence, the other can complete it. I think we'll just maybe have some audience response, but if I may, just somewhat preemptively, invite someone in the audience whom I was conversing with over dinner, and that's your mother, actually, Danielle, because she shared something that I thought would be relevant and significant for us to hear. So, Danielle?
After viewing the premiere in California, it just dawned on me that my father-in-law passed away on the same day that we remember all the other Israeli soldiers. And my middle son, Sharon, was named after my brother, Sharon. Sharon was a soldier in one of the most chosen units in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Force. And on his way home, he was kidnapped. And that happened 18 years ago when Jonathan was having his birth in the state, and my parents came to join his birth. And at the same time I gave birth to my son, I lost my youngest brother. The connection here is that my father-in-law had to fight the Nazi at a time that we did not have the state of Israel. At a time that Jews, they had nowhere to go. And these boys produced this movie basically on their natural reaction. They took him to the scenery, they showed him the scenery, and yes, yet, what do you feel? And how we came up with this movie. And that movie based on what happened 70 years ago, at a time the Jew had nowhere to run. That was not a state of Israel. And Jew was taken as slaughters beside the 30,000 partisans that fought. And thank God for them, I have these 3 boys. If it was not for those partisans that fought, I wouldn't have these 3 beautiful children. And I'm so thankful for the resistance, for fighting back. And as my brother was in the most chosen unit in the IDF and fought back, and that's why he's not here with us. He fought on his way home. He was in a bus stop going to head home, and he was kidnapped by terrorists, by Hamas. And so ironic that the murderer of my brother was in the jail, was put in his place, and because of the release for Gilad Shalit, to release a soldier, my brother was released, and my brother's murder was released, and he kidnapped just last year, murder of 3 teenagers. So it happened 70 years ago when we fought against Judaism and Jew had nowhere to go. It happened 18 years ago just because my brother was wearing a uniform and he's not with me today. And it happened last year ago that those 3 teenagers are not with us, and that started the war, and that war took 72 beautiful flower IDF soldiers. That war happened 70 years ago, but it's everyday comeback, it's everyday fight. And that's what I want to thank Mitch for bringing this up and connecting past and present and future for all of us. They have a better future.
If I might add one thing.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that not only my mom's had a story, not only my uncle's story, but everything that's going on in Israel now adds context to this idea of resistance against anti-Semitism on any front. Maybe because I'm named after him, I always have this type of feeling to, I always have this feeling to, you know, I always think about what happened to my uncle. I always think about about the terror that's going on in Israel, and I always think about what's going on my grandfather's side. From both sides of my family, I've been personally affected by anti-Semitism. I have people that I can't see now because of anti-Semitism, and it puts a toll on me. It puts a toll on my whole family. It should put a toll on every Jewish person, and it should remind them that they need to fight anti-Semitism wherever it may be, and in any form that it may be. And I think you presented 4 very well-articulated, intricate things that this video helped show and helped teach. But there's 3 words that my dad put very simply to me about what his main goal was for what my dad's main goal of the video was, and it was 3 words. It was the Jews fought back. And that's a simple message that we're trying to get across to many students. And that's the main message that we're trying to get across to anybody that watches this video. Yeah.